So if you're a high-level business developer, you are definitely familiar with the sales cliches that get drilled into us from day one.
Oh, absolutely.
And the absolute classic, the one everyone knows, is that old mantra, always be closing, ABC.
Right. It's aggressive, it's relentless, and honestly, it implies that the only thing that matters is getting that signature.
Sometimes at the expense of everything else.
Exactly. And that mindset, especially for people looking for sustainable, high-value deals, is, well, our sources show it's just obsolete. It's actually damaging.
So we need a new ABC.
We need a fundamental redefinition. The new ABC is always be caring.
And that is the premise we are diving into today. Welcome to the deep dive. We are essentially ripping up the traditional sales playbook to look at the secret weapon of elite business development. Empathy.
But not just, soft skills empathy.
Right. We're talking about empathy that's backed by real behavioral science, negotiation tactics straight from FBI experts, and the hard data that shows exactly what separates the top people from everyone else.
Our whole mission here is to give you a shortcut to being really well informed on this. We're unpacking sources that define success, not by aggression, but by detecting these tiny intent signals.
And using empathetic negotiation strategies.
Exactly. We're focused on a core formula that our research points to, which is BD equals purpose, plus empathy, plus truth. And all of that leads to trust.
That feels like more than just a paradigm shift. It sounds like an ethical reset for the whole profession.
It is. It absolutely is.
Yeah.
For you, the business developer, your job isn't just to sell something. It's to be an empathetic advocate. Your main role is to help the prospect declare intent.
And that happens during what you call the activation phase, right?
That's that critical moment. It's where a prospect goes from just being interested to, actively seeing your solution as the way forward.
And if you don't master this empathetic, data-driven process, what's the risk?
The risk is so much bigger than just losing a deal. You actively damage your brand, your reputation. You come across as someone who just doesn't care. And our sources are crystal clear. In high-stakes BD, trust is the only currency that matters.
Okay, so let's break down this mindset shift, starting with identity. If we're not that high-pressure caricature, what do the top sources say we are?
They're essentially highly skilled empaths, but with exceptional cognitive ability. Their success doesn't come from smooth talk. It comes from understanding emotions.
So they can see and respond to those negative and positive intent signals you mentioned.
Precisely. It's all about building trust toward a mutual purpose, which then naturally attracts the transaction rather than forcing it.
And this framework must help a ton with qualification. I mean, if you're getting objections, those are negative intent signals, it often means you're not talking to a real prospect.
That's the most critical distinction to make early on. You're talking to a suspect. An objection hardly ever means no forever. It almost always means you don't have a common purpose yet, or they're missing something.
Like funding, authority, urgency.
Exactly. One of the necessary resources.
So the tough message here for business developers is that chasing after unqualified suspects is just a massive, quantifiable waste of everyone's time and resources.
It is. Your job is to find and nurture qualified prospects until they are ready to declare intent. And to do that, you have to train yourself to spot the subtle, positive signals.
They aren't going to just yell, "Where do I sign?"
Not at all. They're much quieter.
So what are some of those specific behavioral signals the sources say to watch for?
Okay, we've got a great list. You're looking for a shift from big picture questions to logistical ones. For example, genuine excitement about features that meet their specific requirement.
Not just any feature, but one that solves their problem.
Right. Or detailed questions about customization. Maybe they start asking about delivery schedules, or they start talking through trade-offs out loud, like how they could make the purchase.
And of course, the big detailed questions about pricing and payment terms.
Those are all signs that they are mentally visualizing ownership.
And this is where the empathy part comes back in. How do you handle a question about pricing without immediately sounding like you're just jumping at a commission check?
You clarify with a question. That is the key. It keeps the communication totally clear, and it confirms their intent. So instead of launching into your payment plans, you just say something like,
What, like, "Oh, you want to talk price?"
No, more like, "Okay, I hear you have some detailed questions about payment terms. That's great. Does that mean you might be ready to move forward and make a purchase?"
So you're direct, but you frame it as checking in on their interests.
Exactly. If so, I'd be happy to get you those details. It informs their interest instead of forcing a sale.
Which brings us perfectly to the core methodology, the data-driven science of handling objections. And this is where we get insights from, of all people, former FBI negotiators.
Yeah, we're talking about the principles used by Chris Voss. His core technique, mirroring, is not about manipulation. It's a direct, verifiable act of empathy. And it's step 1 in this 7-step empathetic objection sequence.
All right, let's walk through that sequence. Step 1 is repeat or mirroring.
So you just repeat the prospect's last 3 keywords, but with an upward questioning tone. It signals curiosity. So if they say, "We're perfectly happy with our current vendor," you just respond,
"You're happy with your current vendor."
That's it. That little phrase shows you heard them, and it opens the door for them to say more.
And then what comes next is maybe the most counterintuitive piece of advice I've ever seen. Step 2 is pause.
And not a little pause. And this is where a HubSpot study is just electrifying. They found top prospectors paused 5 times longer than average ones after an objection.
5 times. I have to admit, if I tried that, I'd feel like I was holding them hostage on the phone. Is silence really that powerful?
It's unbelievably powerful. It forces them to process what they just said and maybe even self-correct or add more context. It's about creating mental space.
Okay, so after that very long pause comes step 3, which is pace.
Right, and here again, the data tells us exactly how to sound. You slow down.
Slower projects, calm and confidence.
Exactly. The HubSpot study found top prospectors spoke at about 176 words per minute, the average ones. They spoke 7% faster, almost like they were nervous or rushing. Slower is calmer, and calm builds trust.
The next step is listen, which seems obvious, but the research shows most people are terrible at it.
Oh, they're awful. That same HubSpot study, it found average prospectors launched into a massive 21.5-second response right after the prospect finished talking.
Just a monologue.
A total monologue. The top people spoke much, much less. You have to consider everything, the objection they stated and the fear hidden underneath it, before you move to step 5. Validate.
And validation is where you acknowledge their concern, their emotional state.
It is the cornerstone. You are validating the human being, not just the objection. It reduces tension. You might say something like, "I understand your position, and that's a valid concern. It sounds like you're under a lot of pressure to stick with your current vendor."
You're showing them you get it.
You show them their fear is reasonable, and once they feel heard, you move to step 6. Question.
And the data on questioning is just as strong as the data on silence.
It is. HubSpot found top prospectors ask questions nearly 2 times more often. They're not pushing a solution, they're pulling information.
So what's a good question to ask in that spot?
A great one is, so what do you like most about your current vendor, and what are some of the things you wish they could change?
That literally gives you the blueprint for your solution, which brings us to the final stage, the solution, using that feel, felt, found framework.
This is your measured empathetic response, and it's backed by social proof. So first, feel. You restate the common ground. We typically find folks feel pretty happy with their current vendor.
Okay.
Second, felt. You acknowledge the risk. Other corporations like yours have felt that a transition might be too risky. And third, found. You show credible proof. What we found is that we successfully delivered the solution a month faster than the industry average, which dramatically reduces that risk.
So you go from mirroring their feeling to validating the risk to proving you can solve it with data. That's powerful. And the last piece.
Step 7 is just permission. You ask for permission to continue. You could say, so based on that, would it make sense for us to go into more detail? You maintain that mutual respect.
That whole sequence is built on a foundation of trust, which leads us to the bigger picture of negotiation theory. And that trust is defined by those 3 things: purpose, empathy, and truth.
Trust is just. It's non-negotiable. And that common purpose is critical. It links directly to game theory, specifically Nash equilibrium.
The idea from a beautiful mind, right? Where the best outcome for the group happens when everyone pursues the common goal, not just their own self-interest.
That's the one. For you, the business developer, it means you have to define that common goal so clearly that what's best for your company is also what's best for your prospect's success. It maximizes value for everyone.
But when we talk about empathy in these high-stakes negotiations, we have to be really, really precise about the type of empathy. Our sources had a fascinating, almost counterintuitive finding on this from Columbia Business School.
This is such a critical nuance. A 2008 study by Dr. Adam Galinsky found a huge difference between cognitive and emotional empathy. Cognitive empathy, which is perspective taking, understanding how the other side thinks, that actually increased the ability to find hidden agreements and create value.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about emotional empathy?
Well, emotional empathy, which is actually feeling their pain or excitement, was often found to be detrimental.
Wait, detrimental. How can caring too much hurt the deal? That goes against everything we've been taught.
Because when you internalize their emotional state, it can cloud your own focus on the objective criteria and that common purpose. In a negotiation, you have to understand their perspective, but you can't let their feelings dictate your strategy. You have to keep it cognitive.
That is a massive takeaway. Be human, but maintain professional distance for the sake of the deal.
And there's a huge incentive for this. It's advocacy. A 2021 study in the Journal of Marketing found that corporate profits are actually higher when the business developer actively advocates for the prospect during negotiations.
So you're becoming their partner, fighting for them, even against your own internal department sometimes.
You are. And to make that work, you need the final piece of trust. Truth. We have to remember that old line, trust but verify.
Right.
Negotiation is stressful. Feelings run high. Truth, in the form of objective, verifiable criteria, is how you reduce that emotion. You ground everything in things like industry standards, market value, replacement costs, not just promises.
Okay, we've set up the mindset, the methodology, but let's ground this in reality for a second, especially cold outreach, where a lot of this starts. The probability of success it's low.
The numbers are brutal,
Okay.
and we have to acknowledge them. A 2017 Connect and Sell study found that only a microscopic 0.2% of all calls resulted in a follow-on meeting. 0.2%.
And Harvard Business Review added that only about 10% of B2B decision makers even respond to cold outreach in the first place.
And even when you do get a conversation, only 5% of those lead to a meeting. So you have to know you're playing a game with very long odds at the start.
That sounds incredibly discouraging.
It can be,
Right.
which is why you have to pair it with the data on persistence.
Yeah.
Effort isn't wasted, it compounds.
How so?
That same 2017 study found that when you followed up with those previous prospects, your success rate shot up. Meetings booked per conversation went up 1.68 times, and meetings booked per dial went up 2.26 times.
So the most empathetic BD professional is also the one who just persistently shows up with value.
That's it. It is just fascinating how often the most effective, most human things, slowing down, listening, asking questions, are the things supported by the hardest data.
It's the deep irony, isn't it? The path to the highest profits is to behave with the most empathy and to advocate for the other person's success first.
It really is.
So for you, our listener, the BD professional who's looking to elevate your game, let's leave you with the top 3 takeaways from this deep dive into the science of intent.
Okay, first, you have to fundamentally redefine your ABCs. Success isn't about always be closing. It is about being an empathetic advocate and focusing on that core formula. BD, purpose plus empathy plus truth, trust.
Second, harness the power of silence and inquiry. The HubSpot data gives you real, tangible things to do. Slow down to around 176 words per minute, pause 5 times longer than average, and ask questions nearly 2 times more.
And third, remember that critical nuance. Use cognitive empathy, not emotional empathy when the stakes are high. Focus on perspective taking to unlock value. The Columbia study showed that getting caught up emotionally can actually undermine the success you're trying to create for everyone.
That distinction, understanding versus feeling, it changes the whole game.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you to consider. The research says the highest corporate profits come when the business developer acts as the prospect's advocate during negotiations. So, if you radically shift your posture from competitor to a true collaborator, what does that fundamentally change about your long-term value and your personal reputation?
Something to mull over until our next deep dive. Thank you for sharing your sources and for joining us. We'll see you next time.